And okay, well, I'm so excited to be back. It's almost been 365 days since I actually presented the very first time to Civic Tech Toronto. Drove in from Wilton, Ontario to do this. And I am so excited to share with you guys this journey that I've been on leading, but also the amazing collaborative moment that we've had with this crisis online chat service build. So I'm putting my timer on because I'm horrible at keeping aware of how long I speak, and I will be introducing Brett, and Brett's going to chat about the random hacks of kindness and how that played into this moment as well. Okay, great. So I just wanted to give a little context to the project. So since March 2016, my business, PRIMAL GLOW Communications, has been working with the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centres on using technology to better support survivors in frontline settings. And this was a project that is funded by the Ontario government, and it was to test and innovate, use and try out different ways to connect to survivors using technology, and those that were hard to reach, and younger populations as well. So over that time, we built the capacity of those centers to build or to use technology, and then we ended up having an opportunity to actually build some technology. The technology we were using for chat service was actually not ideal for many reasons, and the funder came back to us and said, "Would you like to build something?" And of course, they gave us 2 sticks and told us to build a house, and so that's where we started. So the objective was to improve the crisis services by establishing an online platform for communication with individuals seeking services. So the things that we needed to look at was a chat service that was private and secure. Obviously did not show an IP address, and it didn't require someone to actually register to use it. We needed something that was obviously user-friendly, both on the part of the support seeker, but also on the part of the online facilitator. Those who work in sexual assault centers are not necessarily tech-savvy individuals, and we wanted to make sure that the tool that we were going to build was not one that you would require high digital skills to use. We also need to find something that was sustainable, because the sector that we're working with, which is the sexual assault centers, they're resource poor. They're very resourceful, but they're a resource poor sector. So we needed to find something that was also sustainable and affordable, and of course accessible. We know that support seekers face many challenges when they are seeking the support, so we need to make sure that the actual platform was barrier-free as possible. And we wanted something that was scalable, something that we could build on to make improvements and to add features, and it had to be very functional. So this is the things that we knew we wanted to build as we were going forward. So we had limited resources when we started, so we had to find creative ways to build. And it was going to be a steep learning curve, because my business, which is tech adjacent, I spend a lot of time with organizations building their capacity to use technology. And I don't necessarily have a lot of information about or knowledge about the back end of technology or how it works. And so one of the things I needed to learn was not necessarily the technology, but how do builds happen. So it was an amazing opportunity. I chatted with lots of organizations that were not necessarily tech savvy, more not-for-profit, who are using technology or finding ways to build technology. And then out of that, it was suggested I go to a Civic Tech Hacknight, which I'd never heard of Civic Tech Toronto, but was suggested by Girl Guides Canada to come to Civic Tech Toronto to do a presentation. And at that point, after I did the presentation, I was encouraged to do a pitch, and I had no idea even what a pitch was at that point. So I got up and I shared a little bit more, and out of that, we had 15 folks at that hack night who wanted to sit down and chat with me and share some advice and learn more about the project, which was so overwhelmingly amazing. It was just an amazing night. So from that, I had an opportunity to connect with individuals after that who are part of Civic Tech Toronto, and have continued with the project right up until the end of March here, which has been amazing. I had an opportunity to connect with Patrick at Haifa Worker Collective in Toronto, who did a lot of, he was helping me with this very steep learning curve around how builds happen. And he suggested I chat with the Inclusive Design Research Center at OCAD. And I connected with Vesta Social Innovation Technology as well. And during this time, I was also researching various application programming interfaces. I didn't even know what an API was at that point, to find something that we could use. And also, I met with a lot of different individuals who worked in the technology sector, including certified agile coaches. I met with somebody who was in the middle of a hurricane in New Orleans, who was willing to chat with me, although she was right in the middle of the hurricane. We have user experience researchers and designers and user interface designers and front-end and back-end developers who were willing to sit and talk to me and share information, advice, and also keep connecting me with more people, which was amazing. Out of this moment, I was also introduced to Nomadic Labs, Sharon and Louisa, and out of that, we were introduced to Brett Tackaberry, who is a co-organizer of the Random Hacks of Kindness Ottawa, as well as Civic Tech Ottawa. And I met with Louisa and Brett to talk about whether our project would be a fit or would work for a Random Hacks of Kindness Ottawa event. There was one coming up in Ottawa, which happened last October, and so Brett met and we chatted about what we were trying to do. So Brett, I don't know if you want to come in at this point. I'm going to show some pictures from the event, but you want to explain a little bit about Random Hacks of Kindness Ottawa?
Sure. So Random Hacks has been going for about 5 or 6 years. We've had about 10 events. It started off before Ottawa Civic Tech, but really got going. But it was, the start of, it kind of came up during the start of the whole movement came up during just kind of as Code for America was coming up. But there's obviously a lot of overlap with Civic Tech. But nonetheless, this kind of fits into that Tech4good space too. And I think really, Kim came very sort of prepared with the idea, user experience research, and all this. And so I think what we really did was just provided kind of fertile land for kind of the seed to grow up and start and be something and be a seedling. And so I think we did that pretty successfully. What ended up happening on the weekend was there's a good connection with probably a dozen or so, a mix of developers, designers, and we ended up having a prototype come out of that weekend. And what was good though, I think what was important too, is that even for a few weeks leading up to Hackathon, we spent some time just working on the tech approach. And so like what we usually do as part of the hackathon is coach these projects into being well prepared for a hackathon. And so in doing that, we had some direction in sort of technology, and so by the time everyone came together on the weekends, a lot of productive work was able to happen. And then from that, I'll hand it back over to Kim in 30 seconds. But Kim was able to pick that up and take it further. And so what it really shows, this is a really good case study where a hackathon fits right nicely into that life cycle of a civic tech project. The ideas come out of these meetups and the ether, go into hackathon to kind of produce a little bit of value and produce a prototype. and then and provide the next steps after that. So I think it was a pretty good weekend for that. And then of course too, the hackathon had a lot of the, you know, the horizontal of having well, Google Cloud in this particular case, but like cloud infrastructure donation and all the other sort of tech that kind of, you know, makes it sustaining then after that too. Anyways, Kim, I'll hand it back over to you, but I think, but I just wanted to say that, you know, it was a really good match to produce value out of the hackathon. Kim, over to you.
Yeah, and I also want to say the support that we got beforehand by Brett and Random Hacks of Kindness going into it really made it successful for us, because as Brett was saying, like he had set up I don't even know what it's called. I don't have the tech terminology, but a server or a playground is what they were calling it, on Matrix, which was the open source API that we wanted to try out. And so all of the actual tech smarty pants who were there had never heard of Matrix before, and so we're really keen actually, and really challenged by the actual trying to figure out whether it was going to work for us. So the work that actually happened that weekend on with those folks who were looking at the API, plus the UX researchers, and they were doing journey mapping, the stuff that was actually going on at a table, which I had no idea, I had no clue, because of, again, I'm not that, that's not the work I do. I understood after when we got rolling how much work actually came out of those 2 full days. So that was key for us in terms of moving forward. The other thing that Random Hacks of Kindness also did was it allowed us to basically build our team that we move forward with in terms of the build. We have, I can see Louisa in the picture there. We have Louisa and Sharon from Nomadic Labs, who have been doing the user interface design and front-end development for us. And then Brent Edwards, there he is. I can see him over there poking his head up. He's one of the taller guys. He was actually working on the back end, making sure that it was, we were able to create an anonymous connection. I can't even, I don't even know what he was doing. He was doing a lot of stuff. So we were actually able to move forward with parts of the project team to continue with the work, which it was so important. So after we did the random hacks, guys, I'm sorry, I just wanted to do, while Brett was talking, I was going to show you pictures, but I was intrigued by what he was saying. So, so these are some of the pictures from the random hacks of kindness and event, and it was very funny. I have to say that those who were, you can see the squiggly lines on the computer, I had no idea what they were doing. It was very quiet at our tables a lot. And the Sunday night it was really important, because they also the team had to, or they presented to the group what they had come up with, and I couldn't get up and talk about it or explain it, or so I got to actually receive and listen and hear what they actually had been able to accomplish. And it was I've never experienced that much love. Like, that was just, I felt so much love for this group of really amazing Tech4good peeps. So, and they were showing how they had connected Matrix, which is this open source API that we're using, creates bridges to various communication tools like WhatsApp and Slack and Telegram and SMS texting. And so they were looking at whether they could build some of those bridges and create anonymous connections. So the work that was done just was amazing. And then, so what we learned, so by reaching out to the Tech4good communities, we had these really highly skilled technologists exploring Matrix for us to help determine whether it was going to be a good API for us. We had really comprehensive user experience research that was gathered and interpreted to help inform the build. That was happening after we did Random Hacks of Kindness. We had 2 volunteers, Monique and Julie, who were interviewing sexual assault center staff to chat with them. We had 4 years of working with these centers beforehand, and we had done a pilot. So we had lots of research from before. We also had like 450 volunteer hours that were volunteered to this project from various folks up until March 31st. And then, as Brett mentioned, we had donations of secure servers and their maintenance for a period that will allow us as a project team to identify the most effective way to move forward in service management, which is huge, because as you guys would know, you just don't build it and then walk away. There's maintenance and response and scaling up and all those things that need to happen. So the amazing thing about this project team that we have too is this back-end developer and front-end development team have a really clear understanding of the work of the sexual assault centers and the challenges for victims of sexual violence, which is huge. They came, we had an opportunity to do a presentation at Random Acts of Kindness about the project. I chatted with them during the weekend of in Ottawa. We had a team that understood what we were trying to build as we were starting to get really serious about the build, which was so useful. So out of it, our chat service, which we were just starting to launch, and the thought we were thinking about sharing some of the materials tonight, but we're just at the point of starting to launch it, and it feels like it's not our place necessary to put it out there before the OCRCC has a chance, or the sexual assault centers have a chance to start using the service. But we have now a user-friendly chat service that provides services as very free as possible, offers anonymous connection, ensures end-to-end encryption, enables continuous improvements and additional features, and it will allow us to build those bridges so that support seekers can access it from various entry points, which we're very excited about. And so this whole process reminds me once again that we can be very different creatures and still figure things out together. That's my pig Bernice, and that's Safira, our alpaca. Okay.
I love that. Oh, that's a great way to end it. That's amazing. Brett, Kim, are you open to taking a few questions from our crew? Okay,
I'll just stop to share. I'll just stop to share. Everybody get a good chance to see Piggly Wiggly and Safira?
Oh, that's amazing. I think, yeah, let's firstly give a virtual round of applause. You can also use the reaction. You can use a reaction. Yes, I forgot about that. Sam was using it. That was amazing. That was great. I remember Em was saying to folks who are at Civic Tech, Code for Canada Summit, and I remember catching a glimpse of that too. Okay, so questions. If you have a question, you can drop a Q in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Any questions, folks?
Can I just mention just one thing? The project team right now we're getting together to actually this week to talk about. We're really excited about this really scattered team that's come together and created this thing, and we've got lots of learning that we have done with it. Lots of really successes and some challenges to it, and that we've really were able to build the trust to do this collaboration, and this is so important. And we really, I want to mention that we are looking forward. We're looking at how we can continue building on this kind of energy and continue building. And it's it was built on open source on Matrix, and Sharon, I know Sharon's in the room there with little Elba. Can speak about as the front-end developer, how she built, or how that was built as well. But so
yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. Sharon, did you want to add something, or did you want to share something? No. That's putting you on the spot.
You're putting me on the spot. I don't have anything to share, but I'm totally open to questions.
Okay, amazing. Okay, I'll just kick. Oh no, just kidding. We've got one from Browns. Great story. Is the open source in GitHub for forking?
Okay, I can take that one. The original repo is closed, but we do have a generic form that is open source and open for forking. So I will drop the links in the chat.
Also, Matrix, maybe a link to Matrix as well. Matrix and all the tools that come with it. There's already a huge ecosystem available to support the work that Sharon did.
That's a great question. Amazing. Fantastic. Thanks, Brown. Emily, go for it.
Question, I guess mostly for Kim, just about your final comment about sort of building the trust. I'm wondering if you can go a little bit more into like how that happened. I think that there's a lot of interest in the civic tech world and the data for good world to do projects with and for like very vulnerable communities, and yet making solutions that actually respond to those needs is not easy. So what worked in your case?
I would say the fact that this was actually born out of the a non-tech, like, because we weren't, first of all, we weren't expecting we were going to build technology. We were going to try to use what was already built. Our concentration was on building the capacity of the sexual assault centers to use it. So our pilot was really about, it was really based on how they felt about how they were using it, and then we were really trying to make that tool work for them. So they had a lot of room to give feedback. They had a lot of space to help us understand those pieces of technology. We had all of that, and I have to say that's the community I come from too, that sector. So I'm a mama bear about what's going to come, what we're going to end up with. That's piece of it. But the fact that Sharon and Louisa and Brent and I got to do some interacting before we even got together, and we did I did have a choice, or we did have a choice of getting a tech company to do all the pieces, which I learned that was one of the ways we could do it, but we didn't do that because I had already been, from the conversations I had with folks like yourselves, it was like, hey, this group, like Nomadic Labs has this really great way that they work that would really, kind of jive with what you're doing. So people were looking out for us and really giving us good connections, and, connecting with Brett. Like, it was just, there was lots of that goodwill that was happening there. And I think I haven't felt there's this, what do you call it? Generosity or a creativity, an allowance of us to work things out in the moment that Sharon and Louisa and Brent all came to the project with. I think it's all of us were willing to go on this ride together, even though we may have been a little seasick once in a while. Probably them, because I had the oar and I was going all around in circles and stuff like that. But they've been very kind in and also, yeah, they're weird tech people. And you guys are all weird tech people. Civic tech people are weird tech people, but in a good way. I mean that in a good way. But I do really think that user-centered, when you talk about design, that, I mean, that definitely is driven this moment, for sure.
Totally. Oh, that's great. Wondering, actually, I'll throw a question to you, Kim. Do you have any thoughts on user testing in a remote capacity, or like sort of what the future of user testing looks like for your project, as more teams will have to be distributed and, have to build trust, all kinds of different ways?
That's a really good question. So because I've been working provincially, like with this group that's across the province, most of the work has been remote. We've actually been using Zoom for 4 years now, like really robustly. So this whole, when the planet found Zoom and then freaked out that it was not secure, these centers were using it for counseling. They were very familiar and comfortable with using it. I know that Louisa was doing focus groups through Zoom with sexual assault center folks. We are setting up focus groups through Zoom. But it's interesting when you talk about user experience and getting feedback, one of the things that we need to identify as one of our end users is anybody could experience sexual violence. So the support seeker, there's not a, there's really not a prototype, or there's a, and you could also be a family or a friend who could be connecting to find out how to support someone. So to get a good picture of who that person is. The other thing is, we would never ask for somebody to give their feedback on a chat, crisis online chat, if they're coming looking for support around sexual assault, sexual violence. It just wouldn't be appropriate. So it's been interesting around how do we actually get that information. And we've looked at transcripts and, people sharing how they feel about the service, or, that's one way that we can actually get that. But the remote hasn't been an issue for us. We knew we would have to be, because we're working with center in Timmins and Kenora and Nipissing and Ottawa. Like, we have 29 centers across the province. So that definitely was not, that's something that they've been rolling with. They're also kind of in front of the wave on chat services as well, because we've been working on this, which is so bizarre, because they're definitely not usually tech so they're going to have this chat service built for them that they have now, and they're rolling it out at this point, which is pretty amazing.
Another question from Brown. Thank you. That was great. Another question from Brown. Is this service connected to 211 and other Ontario call centers?
So that's a very good question. Thank you. So what we wanted to develop was something that, if it isn't connected that way, this person comes in, first of all, the person comes in, so when you're asking whether it's connected to 211, or 211, is that to be able to gather resources for those who are, so I'm trying to think of how to, so there's a resource page on the actual chat service that the Sexual Assault Center can add for the facilitator to refer those who are seeking support. So 211 may be one of those services that either the facilitator is accessing to find out information for a support seeker, or they may give that 211 information to that individual. But it's they have a lot of resources. They have the Ontario Coalition Rape Crisis Centers. They have a lot of resources for that. Kids Helpline, the LGBT Youth Line. So they have a lot of those resources that they already have, because they already have crisis phone lines. So they have collected these resources over the years, and now they just are accessing them online. We were really looking at building, we were using something called iCarol, which was a chat service that was built. It was first built as a data collection or a volunteer management program, and then they built a chat service on it. So it's very data heavy. We wanted to have 2 cans and a string.
Kim, it's Jonathan. I was the guy that posed the question.
Oh, hi, Jonathan.
Yeah. So part of it would be, there are all these helplines like Kids Help and the other one, Connects Ontario, and telehealth, all that, right? And I know I've talked to some of them in the past, and they'll say they can generate reports at an aggregate level, so it's not compromising privacy, and give that back to municipalities, who then can, say, how are we doing on sustainable well-being in our community? And then they can look at, okay, do we need more resources here, mental health, or do we need it more over in our transition houses, or where do we need to allocate to address the need in our communities?
Which is huge, and I'm all about collecting that stuff, because we do need to know that stuff. The centers all do gather statistics and gather all that information for their funding body, like the Ministry of Community, Ministry of Community Social Services, Ministry of Health, and then Ministry of Attorney General. Those are the 3 ministries that they report to. So they're already collecting those services, and they all have different data collections programs that they use, some of them are connected to women's shelters, so they may be using a program called Wish. So we're staying away from the data management piece of this because all of these centers all are funded differently. They are their governance structures are different. Their programming is different. They're connected by the sake that they provide support services around sexual violence and respond to it in their communities. So they are reporting and they are sharing that stuff, but we didn't, Brett and I had a conversation about this. We weren't going to get into program management or data collection for the centers because they're already doing it really well. And it was going to feel like a repeat on some of the things that they're doing. But I agree, like that stuff has to be gathered. And finally, they're gathering around sexual violence. They really are looking at those numbers. And those numbers, and it's really important to know too that when we did the pilot, those who were accessing the services had never reached out to a sexual assault center before. So we were actually able to. That was felt so amazing to us, and we know that most people don't report when they are sexually assaulted or experience sexual violence. And if they have an opportunity to connect through an anonymous service like this, those numbers are going to change, right? We're going to have more realistic numbers.
Oh, fantastic. I know we're going a bit over time, but I'm going to allow this one final question from Andy. And the question is, can you speak to the rollout, who leads this, and how the team's being supported to use the tool? The new tool?
Excellent. Okay, so we all have our roles on the rollout team. So we've got Brent Edwards, who is actually spinning up the services on each of the servers. So each of the centers have their own individual server. So he's very busy. Taking care of that. So it could be we may have up to 29 centers over the next year. We receive more funding to be able to do this on a pace that's more respectful of the centers and their capacities. We've got, Sharon and Louisa have put together an amazing user manual. And then we have a Google form that they fill out around customization. That goes to Brent. Brent spins up the service. I'm responsible for training them on how to use the service. It's pretty useful, or it's pretty easy to use, user friendly. I'm training them on how to, as administrators, how to administrate it. We have someone who does amazing work on providing support on digital platforms. So she's been working with us for 4 years on the dynamics of providing support on digital platforms. So all that stuff around dealing with complex emotions, suicidal ideation, emojis, acronyms, all those things that are around digital platforms. And then we've got, we provide a ongoing support debriefing sessions, online facilitator debriefing sessions, as well as we'll be responding to training opportunities as we go forward.
That's great.
And then we have, then we also, PRIMAL GLOW Communications also works on the various levels of the organization. So we also have worked on policy and procedures. We've developed that around using technology in these capacities. And then we've also, looked at educating the boards on their boards of directors around the services they're trying to provide. Many levels, we know. I was an executive director of one of the sexual assault centers. I know if you don't take care of all the levels.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm hoping Kim and maybe Brett, you folks can stick around if folks have any questions. Amazing. This is truly incredible. Thank you so much. I am officially stopping the recording now. So if you